Mercedes has barely troubled Ferrari and Red Bull in Formula 1 this season, but is now in conflict with them off track in a big way. The world champion team was at the heart of a huge argument over the Canadian Grand Prix weekend after the FIA made an initial attempt to intervene in the dispute over the porpoising and bottoming out suffered by the 2022 cars. Ferrari and Red Bull have pushed back against a last-minute and then quickly postponed technical directive issued on the eve of the Montreal event, prompting Mercedes boss Toto Wolff to label the political games pitiful. Suddenly, a topic that was only bubbling away in the background until recently is now one of the most controversial stories of the season, and one that looks far from settled. F1's new ground effect cars are run low and stiff, so have poor ride quality, and have also suffered from porpoising, which is an aerodynamic phenomenon causing high-frequency bouncing. Now that several drivers from different teams have complained about back pain and raised concerns over potential long-term consequences of driving these cars, the FIA has intervened on safety grounds. It seems a reasonable endeavour, but it's one that had an immensely controversial beginning, even if most teams and drivers broadly welcome the FIA's desire to help. The new technical directive was only communicated to teams on Thursday in Montreal, much to the displeasure of many. And the nature of it left some suggesting it was tantamount to an in-season change of regulations. The FIA intends to set a limit for the vertical oscillations drivers can be subjected to, and force teams to alter their setup if they are found to be breaching that limit. In the short term, the FIA has permitted the use of a second floor stay to try to help any struggling team stiffen its floors and help prevent porpoising. Only one team tried to do this in Canada, Mercedes, but we'll come to why that was so controversial in a little while. The FIA is also exploring potential changes to the technical regulations for the future to reduce the potential for this phenomenon to occur and to improve the ride quality in general. This last point seems widely accepted. Ferrari team boss Mattia Binotto even said it's valid to try to tackle the porpoising phenomenon through technical changes, which is not a stunningly surprising position given Ferrari has been one of the worst afflicted teams. But Red Bull and Ferrari made it clear they are not happy with how the FIA has gone about this in the short term. Ferrari even went as far as telling the FIA it didn't believe the technical directive is applicable, and Binotto said it was implemented by mistake. His argument is that a TD, which is issued by the FIA technical department, can only be used to clarify or help police existing regulations. It is not a function that exists to change regulations or introduce new ones, otherwise Ferrari says F1's governance system is being ignored. Even if the FIA can unilaterally implement changes on safety grounds, there is still a process to follow. A consultation with the Technical Advisory Committee, which is the forum in which potential rule changes can be tabled, a new regulation drafted, and then put to the FIA World Motorsport Council for formal approval. But a new regulation is something that Red Bull is dead against. Team boss Christian Horner keeps insisting that it's not a wider issue with the regulations, but a conceptual issue for teams like Mercedes, and therefore it's down to them to deal with it, not the FIA. Horner reckons teams just need to be left alone, and if the FIA really feels any car looks unsafe, it can always black flag and disqualify them. There's lots more to get into in what is a massive argument for Formula 1, so if you like this video, please like it. And if you want to see more, please subscribe to our channel. It's free, it's easy to do, and it really helps us out. Ferrari said this turned into a big noise for nothing in Canada because the TD was not fully applied anyway. The FIA did begin a process of data gathering from all the cars throughout practice, but there was no bouncing metric established for the race itself. It was felt that the complexity of establishing that metric from all the data from the different cars was not going to be a quick job. So the next race, the British Grand Prix at the start of July, is now being mooted as the likely implementation of the full directive. Teams were informed of this on Friday evening in Canada, barely 24 hours after the technical directive had been revealed in the first place. The controversy didn't end with that communication though. The matter was discussed at a meeting of team bosses on Saturday morning, where Wolff is said to have made his dissatisfaction with the situation very clear. That was something Horner couldn't resist having a pop at, saying there was an element of theatre going on because Netflix cameras were present for the meeting, filming it for the next season of Drive to Survive. Mercedes has been at the centre of this story for a long time. Its car was porpoising badly in the opening races, and now, having cured the worst of that problem, it's bottoming out. Mercedes driver George Russell, a director of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, has led calls for the FIA to intervene and do something to change the rules, on the grounds that drivers cannot sustain this physical toll for several seasons. That stance has been backed up by teammate Lewis Hamilton and also Wolff, but some see this as nothing more than Mercedes trying to use the issue to get a rule change that will help it address the performance deficit it currently has. Meanwhile, Ferrari and Red Bull are loath to see any significant in-season changes because it could have a tangible impact on their title battle. If the bouncing limit is enforced and the Ferrari is still aggressively porpoising, it could be made to increase its car's ride height and lose performance, which could end its championship hopes. But if there is a wider universal rule change, which Mercedes seems to be keen on, then Red Bull could find itself having to make car or setup adjustments for a problem it's not suffering from. Competitive agendas are clearly at play here, and that may well include Mercedes. Wolff says he knows people will question the sincerity of his position, but quoted Red Bull driver Sergio Perez saying you can even lose your vision when braking, and referenced comments made by Carlos Sainz, Daniel Ricciardo, Esteban Ocon and Kevin Magnussen as evidence this was much more than a problem for one team. After his comments at the meeting where he is said to have clashed with Binotto and Horner, Wolff went on to hit out at unnamed other teams in public. He insisted his position was one that solely had driver safety at heart, while rivals tried to block changes. Wolff accused team bosses of being disingenuous, manipulating what was being said in order to keep their competitive advantage, and playing political games while the FIA tried to resolve the situation. He suggested drivers at some teams were being briefed to play down the problem and called such manipulations in the background pitiful. Another reason Mercedes was at the centre of this topic in Canada was over something we mentioned earlier, the appearance of an experimental second floor stay on its car in practice. This was one of the short-term measures permitted by the FIA and followed an initial agreement way back between the pre-season tests that teams could add a first floor stay, something not permitted by the regulations. The late notice of the FIA technical directive suggested no team would be able to react in time to have a second stay on the car in Montreal, but Mercedes did. Mercedes says the second stay was an attempt at responding to the FIA technical directive on site. It appeared on George Russell's car in FP1 and Lewis Hamilton's as well in FP2. Though it's not been explained exactly how Mercedes reacted so quickly, theoretically it could be feasible to take an existing stay, shorten it and put it on a mounting point on the body and more inboard on the floor. But some teams have disputed this, Ferrari and Red Bull among them. Binotto was evidently sceptical of Mercedes' claim it was done overnight in Canada, declaring his surprise at Mercedes' capacity to do so and stating that Ferrari could not have done the same. Horner said that permitting the use of a second stay was overtly biased to sorting one team's problems out, and he claimed Mercedes turned up with it in advance of the TD, so Horner clearly has no interest in giving Wolff the benefit of the doubt. Earlier in the weekend, Alpine team boss Otmar Szafnauer also hinted that such a rapid reaction would not be possible. The implication was obvious. Teams were openly wondering whether Mercedes had some kind of heads up that this technical directive was coming, were being given a specific helping hand by the FIA, or had been able to preempt it in some way. Szafnauer also made barely veiled threats that any team running a second stay, which as we know only Mercedes tried, could be protested. This was along similar lines to Binotto's suggestion that the FIA's technical directive could not or should not be applied. As we mentioned though, Mercedes didn't end up running the second stay beyond FP2. The experiment was not effective and it was removed for the rest of the weekend. Mercedes could have run the stay if it wanted to. The second stay was considered by the FIA to be separate to Phase 2 of the technical directive, which is defining and applying the bouncing limit. That's the part that's been delayed to the British Grand Prix at the earliest. But that's really just a footnote in this story, at least for now. It's clear that the FIA has a messy and complicated situation to manage, with safety forming the basis of one side of the argument and supposed sporting fairness acting as the counterpoint. Wolff remains adamant that the core of this topic is driver well-being, and that teams have a responsibility not to take the issue lightly, with swift and drastic change required. Ferrari and Red Bull disagree in different ways and for different reasons. Where this goes from here is a massive unknown and could yet be a defining element of the 2022 season.